My life's work is dedicated towards, serving these Marines. And it's a privilege and an honor. Force design is no longer just a theory, right? Force design is here. I'm implementing those capabilities as we speak. I'm getting better and stronger every day with the additional acquisition of capabilities, structure, formation changes, etc. Marines are looking for a fight. We're not looking for a fair fight either. We're going to do everything we can to make it an unfair fight. Force design is exactly that tool. We come to fight and we come to win. And that's what our nation demands of us, and that's what we're going to deliver.
My guest today is a Connecticut native who began his Marine Corps career as an FA-18 pilot. He went on to command a fighter attack squadron, a Marine Air Group, a Marine Air Wing, and a NATO task force. Today, he is the I MEF Commanding General who leads more than a quarter of all active duty Marines. Lieutenant General Mike Cederholm, welcome to the Fighter Pilot Podcast.
Thanks, Cello. It's just an absolute pleasure to be here today, both personally and professionally. We go back a long ways, over 20 years, so on the personal front, I'm proud of you, what you're doing here, and thanks for the opportunity. And always, any chance that I get to be able to brag on the Marines of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, I'll take. So thanks for letting me have that opportunity.
You're welcome. And I have to tell you, I'm a little out of sorts, to be honest, because you have an entourage, you're wearing 3 stars. I still think of you as Homey. I mean, 24 years ago, we were debating tactics at Top Gun together. So,
well, the good news is I'm still Homey. So
terrific. Okay, well, I waved a lot of your bio there, if you will. We'll cover some of that. But I'd like to start right at the top. What is I MEF?
So I MEF is about 44,500 Marines and sailors, about 17,000 family members attached to that. We're spread over 4 bases, so Camp Pendleton, Yuma, Miramar, and 29 Palms. We provide ready forces, relevant forces for fleet commanders, MAGTAF commanders, as well as combatant commanders. And we're on the daily space and out in competition every day. And we're also prepared to, at the drop of a dime or on a moment's notice, meet our mandate, which is America's force and readiness, and switch to crisis response or global combat operations.
And global is a key word. Is there a part of the globe you focus on, or is it really the whole planet?
Yeah, great question. So we are worldwide deployable, but our area is the Indo-Pacific AOR.
There are some who would say that conflict in that AOR is almost inevitable, which scares me a little bit. Now, my guess is you're going to say you have to be prepared for that, but what's your thought on conflict in the Indo-Pacific region?
So our job as a Marine Corps, again, is to meet our mandate, which is to always be ready for that transition. Outside of that transition, we are in competition. So that word first started floating around here about 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody really knew what it meant. Now we have a really good idea. We're in competition every day. We're in competition to ensure, in our case, of a free and open Indo-Pacific, right? We believe in and respect the laws of sovereignty and borders. We believe in transparency. We believe in seeking peaceful resolutions for any type of disputes. But make no mistake, we are also prepared to switch from deterrence and competition into crisis or global combat operations at the drop of a dime, according to our tasking from our national leadership.
Yeah.
So do I think conflict is inevitable? I couldn't tell you that. I wish I had a crystal ball. We hope that there's not, but we're prepared to end it if it is.
Yeah. Now, you are based in Camp Pendleton, California?
I am.
Okay, but are your 44,000 Marines there? I'm guessing they're everywhere.
No, they're spread over those 4 bases. And then usually we have, in excess of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 Marines deployed at all times.
Wow.
So 44,500 great sailors and Marines, again, spread over Camp Pendleton, Yuma, Miramar, and 29 Palms, and then deployed to all 4 corners of the globe.
Yeah.
So we truly meet our mandate. Every climbing place that we can carry a gun, that's where you'll find United States Marines, and that's where you'll find I MEF.
Yeah. And you said now twice sailors as well, right? There are certain
Absolutely.
jobs that the Marine Corps doesn't do. You are a basic fighting unit. So what, some of the corpsmen, some of the religious services, probably a bunch of others besides your rides sometimes.
Absolutely. Medical Corps as well.
Yep.
So our docs, our chaplains, which we love to death, as well as some of our other enablers are all part of I MEF.
Yeah.
So when we roll out the door as a Marine Air Ground Task Force, the MAGTAP.
Yeah.
That's our basic element of employment. It's scalable, so we can go anywhere from a Marine Expeditionary Unit that works for the MEF, all the way on up through a MEB-like structure, Marine Expeditionary Brigade, all the way on up to the Marine Expeditionary Force. So whatever the mission is, we task tailor to that, and we roll out the door to meet the mission requirements.
Yeah. Now, you as the commanding general, but also an aviator, is that a coincidence? Is that a requirement? Is that just you've risen to this rank because of your performance, and just so happens you are an aviator, but, right, every Marine a rifleman, so it's, I don't know, is it germane that you're an aviator in that role necessarily?
It's germane. I think, if you look at the preponderance of I MEF Commanding Generals, I think I might be the third aviator. So out of about 44 in the long line of great illustrious leaders that have written the chapters of history of I MEF. But it helps me in certain aspects. I also have, employing the three great tools or three great axioms of leadership, right? Surround yourself with great people, which I've done, and I forget the other two. So
I'm guessing that's intentional.
So
all you need to do is surround yourself with great people.
All you need to do is surround yourself with great people. We have that. We have all walks from the ground combat element, the logistics combat element, and the aviation combat element.
Well, so this being the Fighter Pilot Podcast, I'm going to circle back to aviation quite a bit. Do you get a chance much to ply your trade anymore?
No, unfortunately, my work day is spent doing other things. Do I miss flying? Absolutely, I miss flying. Do I still love to go down to the flight line any chance I get? Go kick boxes, walk around the flight line. We did it just the other day. Love to do that. But, me flying now, I'm more of a hindrance to training, not like days of old.
Yeah.
And, Commandant pays me to do other things besides fly.
I won't speak for you, but for me, I was never more tactical than probably right at the end of Top Gun. And really when I went back to the fleet, it was as good as it gets. And for guys like us, once you have that standard in your mind, if you can't meet that anymore, it's like, just get out of the way.
So true. So true. We always railed against the old guys, right? When we were youngsters, hey, you shouldn't be flying tactical fighters after the age of 30 is what we used to think, right? So I'm about ready to turn 58. Still love the smell of JP8. Still stand in awe of what our men and women do every day as they get into our various contraptions and they go out, they hang it on the line, and they train for war.
Well, and in your role, if I may speak for you, I'm guessing you also love the, plane load of Marines ready to go, the grunts. Every other MOS is all critical to what you described earlier your job is. And I'm sure you have a heart for all of that.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
All 44,500, this isn't a job for me. It's a calling.
Passion. Yeah.
It is. It's a calling. So, if I find myself, what's the old saying, Jello, find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Bingo. I
don't feel like I do work any day. It's just a natural calling. If I'm doing something on a Saturday or a Sunday, it's out of love. And it's out of, I need to deliver for those 44,500 to go out and do our nation's bidding. And it's an absolute privilege to do it every day.
But it's also a very serious business. Again, getting back to your particular AOR, General James Mattis was famous for saying when asked what keeps you up at night, he says, nothing. I keep my adversaries up at night. But with your responsibilities, I wonder if you do any tossing and turning, and if so, if you'd be willing to share what it is.
Sure. I think two things affect my sleep patterns, if you will. I think one is worrying if I did enough that day to advance the ball, to remove any barriers that may be out there. But I think the other one, and probably a bigger driver, is excitement. So not to be corny, but I set my alarm for 4:08 and 4:16. Why those times? I don't know. It's the precision, person that came from how we grew up. Mm-hmm. But I'd say 4 out of 5 days, I outwake that alarm. So I sit there and I watch for the clock to tick down so I can get out of bed. So I think it's excitement that keeps me up at night, as well as a drive to ensure that I've done everything I can to meet the expectations of those Marines and sailors that I have the privilege of serving with.
I can imagine. Before this billet, you were the Deputy Commandant for Aviation.
Yes.
Is that, by the way, about the equivalent? I have to always bring things back to Navy speak. Is that about like the Commander of Naval Air Forces, the Air Boss?
It is.
Okay.
It is. We have a different kind of responsibilities and authorities, but that's probably the best equation in there. And that relationship has always been great between DCA and Air Boss.
Well, can we talk about that role? Because I don't know that much about it. I mean, what was your primary duty as the DCA?
So, first I'll caveat, Jello, with the fact of, I heard it described best by General Odierno one time when he was coming out of Iraq. And he was on a speaking tour. He had just been in charge in Iraq, and he was on a speaking tour for about 30 days. And he opened his presentations with somewhat of the following. He said, look, I'm only going to speak for 30 days because the half-life of me being over there, the half-life of knowledge is about 30 days. After that, I'm irrelevant. So, take anything I say of realizing, I've been away from being DCA since February 16th. So there's a lot of half-lives in there.
Okay.
That being said, the Deputy Commandant for Aviation is the principal advisor to the Commandant. He's also the principal liaison and institutes the Naval Aviation Enterprise across the Marine Corps. So we build budgets. So we take that responsibility very seriously, and we have great processes and procedures in place, great staff as well, to execute those duties.
Yeah. And you were there, I would submit, during some pivotal times, a lot of things going on with a lot of different platforms. Let's touch on a couple of them with your caveat in mind of the half-life, but your experiences while you were there. What's going on with fifth-generation integration into the Marine Corps? Is that going well, and how did that go when you were there?
Yeah, so fifth generation, the short answer is that fifth generation integration is going well. There are the challenges you read about, right? TR3, Block 4, etc. But as a transition goes, and transitions are always difficult, whether it's passage of lines, units that are transitioning, our transitions are always difficult. But overall, it's going very well. And it's worth every bit of those problems or issues that we'll work our way through. We just brought online our second F-35C squadron, so integration with the Navy, and they're sitting out on the boat as we speak. So the naval integration part is going well. Fifth generation fighters are really an incredible upgrade for what we need to do on both today's battlefield and tomorrow's battlefield. The F-35, an incredible airplane. Had the opportunity to fly it.
B model or both?
The B model. Okay. And it was absolutely incredible. The amount of situational awareness that could be generated compared to what we had, right? The three things I think that amazed me the most out of fifth gen, and I just flew it once, right? So I'm by no means an expert or can employ it like our young men and women are out there doing right now. That being said, the three things that really caught me by surprise were, number one, I expected it to kind of ride, taxi and fly like our Hornet, right? Kind of smooth ride. It's not. It's what I would equate to, what I would imagine like an F-8 was. It shakes, rattles, and rolls. It's big. And so that surprised me. Number two thing that surprised me was the acceleration. So, you go out to the working area, you bring it down to about 150 knots, you plug in the burners, and you watch that speed tick up to 500, 550, and it is a kick in the pants. So that was big smile on my face, during that part. But the biggest thing that surprised me the most, and I had always known about it, but when you see it as an operator, was as soon as I took off, the displays that the information that I had from Charles, I took off out of Beaufort, so the information that I had available to me from Columbia, South Carolina to Charleston, South Carolina to Savannah, Georgia was absolutely amazing. So, I wish we had it when we were going through the Top Gun IUT syllabus, that type of essay. We didn't. Yeah. But it is really a remarkable airplane. So I'm excited at what that's going to do. But also, I think it's important to realize, Marine aviation is set out on what is called Project Eagle. Project Eagle is a 3 fit-up campaign plan, so it brings us out to 2040. And it has about 10 roadmaps that are embedded in that. And what they've done is they've gone and they've anchored, hey, what is going to be the threat environment in 25? Pretty easy to predict. 2030, 2035, 2040. Why did we stop at 2040? Well, a preponderance of the academic thinking, an estimate stop around 2040. After that, it gets fuzzy. But then we went back and we refined what would we think the operating environment would be back onto 2025. At that point, we said, okay, who's going to be our customers? I still think it's going to be the MAGTAF, it's still going to be the fleet, and it's still going to be joint commanders that are out there. And knowing that, who our customers are, what capabilities do we have to be able to deliver to each one of them, and then map them out. And now it turns into a simple mapping game and acquisition game after that. I bring that up only because, we're already plotting our entry into 6th gen. What does that look like? There's a big debate out there, right? But if you look at 6th gen, originally we thought at the end of the 20s, 6th gen was coming out. Peace was starting to break out around the world a little bit. So we kind of slid that, into the 30s. Then we see on the unclassed side, they flew a, quote, prototype a few years ago. We know that there's multiple countries that are pursuing 6th gen like technology. So we've plotted our entry into that. How does 5th gen work into that? Not only 5th gen, 4th gen interactions, but how does 5th gen, 6th gen interactions go? What do we want to define that space? So we've plotted out our entry into that, amongst other things. I'm really excited about Project Eagle, and it's really taken hold now.
But how good do you feel about your assumptions, right? What we know about 2040 right now, think about the war in Ukraine, what we maybe would have thought a war would look like 5 years ago. But with all this now distributed information, people with apps saying, oh, I see some Russians over there, or the use of commercial off-the-shelf drones, do you feel good about the assumptions we're making about the future? Things are changing fast. I mean, the things we did as kids versus the things our kids are doing, totally different.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great question, Jello. Do I feel comfortable with the assumptions we've made? Yes. Here's why. Do I think that our assumptions will be validated or attained, or I should say, will our assumptions attain that we're making for 2040? I have no idea. But we've created a process where not only every 5 years do we rewrite and revise this plan, right, Project Eagle. So in 2025, what we'll do is we'll extend this plan out to 2045. So we'll add 5 years to it. 2030, we'll push it out to 2050. So we're always looking 20 years ahead. But individually, each year, when we release the aviation plan, the AV plan, we will go in and adjust and correct the assumptions for our POM builds that are currently going on. So I'm comfortable not in that our assumptions are all valid out to 2040, impossible to do. But I'm really confident in our processes to adjust those on a yearly basis that don't induce perturbations that the system couldn't handle. So it is in constant state of revision. It undergoes major rework every 5 years to inform the fit-up cycle. So therefore, I'm really confident that we can get out to 2040 and beyond and reach the 2040 point with a real good glide slope. And I think it's important to shoot longer too. Meaning, I think that when we define that along the way, it allows us to maybe make different decisions today that are data informed because we have a vision, we have a plan, it's well researched. It will lead us to slightly different decisions today that will really optimize our position in each one of those epic time periods.
Well, so the point is you don't just put this on the shelf and then in 2039 open it up and say, okay, what's happening next year?
Yeah. Gosh, I wish we had revised it along the way.
You think?
Not by any means.
Okay. So 5th gen and beyond is here and it's here to stay and you've had a chance to fly. And did you say once meaning like one tour or just one flight?
One flight.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One flight.
Did they let you hover?
No. No.
Darn, I wanted to ask how that went.
Yeah, just in the sims, the workup process is absolutely amazing these days. With the advancements in simulators, training aids. It was about 6 weeks of ground school, 19 simulators. Simulators now, Jello, in the F-35, 1.8 to 1.9 hours. So you're working hard in there. There's a lot to learn, and you feel really well prepared when you step into that airplane.
I imagine. Continuing with the theme of when you were DCA, what about the CH-53K, right, King Stallion?
Yeah.
Is that making its way now to the fleet? And did you have a chance, I think, to ride in the seat of one of those as well?
I did. I flew that as well, although, flew is a pretty loose term, right? It is an amazing airplane. And yes, it is being instituted and implemented right now on the East Coast. We're going to transition 2 East Coast squadrons to CH-53Ks. The first one should go out on deployment here in about a year or so. A little more than that, out on a MEU deployment. So it's hitting the fleet, and it's ingrained now. It will come to the West Coast in a few years, and we'll transition our 53 Echoes into 53 Kilos. It is a game-changing airplane with regards to assault support, mobility around the battlefield, and its ability to carry things, heavy things.
Interesting. How about the MV-22 that has had a very, I don't want to call it tumultuous development, but it's been a challenge, I feel like, over the years, and now it's going through, again, issues that I'm not as privy to as perhaps you are. But while you were there, how was the MV-22 making its way through and being incorporated in the Marine Corps?
Sure. Well, we are done standing up squadrons, right? Well, that's not true. We're going to bring back one more squadron here real shortly, I believe, within the next year or so. Just right up front, Jello, you mentioned the tumultuous part. Certainly, there's been heartbreak in the MV-22. We mourn the loss of any of the air crews. But when we're talking MV-22, you're talking about an assault support platform that has multi-crew members on it. So we mourn those, and those take a little piece of our heart every time. So let me just be straight about that. That being said, the MV-22 is a game-changing platform. It extends our reach. It allows us to go places we could have never gone before. It extends the global reach of the Marine Corps. It extends the global reach of the Joint Force. It gives us mobility that we have been unable to achieve by any other platform or means of transportation. It's a remarkable airplane. So, again, my heart goes out to those families. God bless them. They hurt every time that they occur. But that capability, it's a safe airplane. My son was a crew chief in the Osprey. I fly in the Osprey whenever I can. I love that airplane. I think the commanders love it. 3 days ago, I was on the flight line and went and did a surprise visit to a VMM squadron, an Osprey squadron. Now, what I've figured out is that I can't sneak around anymore because they had a lookout out there for me. So God bless them. They knew the old man was coming. But I just walked in, went into maintenance control, started talking to the Marines about, what's the status of our airplanes. And they're just doing, our maintainers. Oh, incredible. They do God's work out there. And in that conversation, I asked both the CEO and others, do you have confidence in the airplane? And unequivocally, they have tremendous confidence in that airplane. The men and women who are flying it are doing incredible work. They have confidence in that airplane. Not my words, not me trying to shape anything, but that's coming from those who operate. And that means a lot to guys like you and I, right?
Yeah.
That's not the leadership saying that. Those are the air crews saying that.
I'm guessing there's a bit of a bow wave whenever you go anywhere, and there's got to be a part of you that wishes sometimes you could just roll in and just, hey, it's just Homey, guys.
I try, but it's not working. It's not working, Jello.
Yeah. Well, I was the benefactor of that to get you here today, so it's not all bad. What about unmanned aerial systems in the Marine Corps? I know there are different levels of both utilization, but also interest in the future. Where are we at? And again, kind of thinking back to when you were the DCA, but maybe in your capacity now as well.
Yeah, I am excited at the progress of UAS, and I'm excited at the future of UAS, embedded into all of our operations. So, Group 1 and 2 are now pushed down into our GCE and LCE, ground combat elements, logistics combat elements, and they are doing great work. We're working on Group 3 type UASs as part of our VTOL family of systems plan overall, but we are employing UASs, including MQ-9s, as we speak. So we have VMU-1 based out of Yuma, worldwide deployable, and it is really a game changer for us with regards to cataloging things, with regards to C2, with regards to closing kill chains, and that's about all I'll go into here. But on the programmatic side, with regards to, there's another roadmap for UAS. So what is the Marine Corps' transition into son of MQ-9? What does that look like? What characteristics does it have? How does it even further enable us to penetrate deeper? How does it allow us to close kill chains? How does it allow us to do ISR? And those plans aren't just plans. There are things that are coming out to the force right now that are really game-changing and meets our mandate, right? My boss, Lieutenant General Bill Journey, great leader, has a saying. He has many sayings. One of them is, if you ain't getting better, you're getting worse. We're getting better in the UAS category every day. We're learning more about them. More capabilities are coming online. We're employing it into our tactics, techniques, and procedures. It's becoming part of who we are. So we're always looking to get better, but I'm really excited about where we're at and where we're going.
Yeah. When you came in the Marine Corps, there was a lot of different aircraft on the ramp. Just even in the fighter attack, you had the AV-8B Harrier, you had the F-18, you had Prowlers, and maybe even A-6s, and I'm not sure. Those were just leaving the Navy when I came in. The force looks a little more homogenous now. Is that a good thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, especially with the capabilities that we're talking about transitioning from, right? I think it was Hemingway that talked about, you fall in love with the first airplane you fly. So, naturally, I love the F-18. I love the capabilities that the AV-8 brought. But bottom line is, Jello, if I were to walk out and see a Harrier, a Hornet, and an F-35 sitting on the line, and I needed to send one of those to go do close air support, to fight in, go do close air support for our young men or women, 11 out of 10 times I'd hop in that F-35 and I'd go. As capable as we were, as good as we were when we were younger,
with what we had,
with what we had,
yeah.
I would choose those capabilities. So, it's kind of a false, it's like looking back on the past, which is always fun to do, but it's a false comparison. There is no comparison. So the fact that we are down to, one TAC air platform, does that cause me concern? No, it doesn't. And especially as we layer in our capabilities, with unmanned systems, I think it's important to realize, and you mentioned this earlier as we were talking, is, at the speed of change that's out there right now, can you really afford to go all in on an ACAP-1 program, that you're going to fly that airplane, invest all the money in that airplane, and buy them at huge quantities, and then fly them for 35 years, right? Or would it be smarter to buy a certain quantity, create wedges of capability that you can turn over quickly, and then, go into 6th gen when 7th gen, whatever that is, right, comes online. You're transitioning out of 5th gen. When 8th gen comes online, it just gives you the ability to create wedges of capability over time, which you can maximize the capabilities that you're able to acquire instead of riding great capability out long after its useful life on the battlefield.
Sure. But let me challenge that just for fun.
Please.
It took so long for the F-35 to get where it is now. Do we feel like we can get there quickly enough with 6 and beyond generation technology? Because it seems to me, of course, with everyone having a cell phone, every setback in the program is captured. Every leader wants their constituents to have jobs doing it. It seems hard to get this ship going and then to turn it once it is going. So do you feel confident that we can get 6th and 7th generation solutions quickly enough for you to do your current job?
I do. And here's why.
Okay.
Just as I talked about a few minutes ago of creating wedges of capability and maybe not buying out such huge quantities in each part, it gives you the ability to switch out and not have to accept the perfect airplane coming off the line on day one. I think that, if you go back and you do a history and a review of kind of the forensics of the F-35 program, the delays were also attributed to added capabilities and requirements that went into that airplane. So, If we don't have to do that, if we can do spiral development, if we're not buying all those airplanes to last, are the next capability to last 35, 40 years, right? I mean, shoot, we started flying F-18s in the 1980s, and we're going to fly them in the Marine Corps until the early 30s. That's 50 years, right? Almost 50 years. If you're going to buy less quantities, you can switch and rotate and acquire capabilities into the future. Therefore, you don't have to accept and demand the first airplane be the end-all, be-all. If you are innovating and modernizing on that wedge-type timeline.
Yeah, terrific. Homey, I have two groups of folks that I told I was going to be sitting down with you, and I said, what should I talk to the general about? And so I have more of my own ideas, but since their questions were so good, I thought I would just go to those now, and then we can freestyle off some of these. But one group is the Patreon supporters who help keep our lights on here in the studio. And Matt McDonough said he would like to know, and by the way, some of these are very good questions. What is the Marine Corps doing to prepare for the greatest physical challenge in a peer-level conflict in the Pacific, that is, sheer distance, especially on and over water, and long lines of communication? And then he goes on, will the Marines fight from distributed bases and or out of Australia?
Great questions. A lot to unpack there, right? Yeah. So if I miss something in my answer, Jello, please come back to me. I know you will. Of course, vast distances across the Indo-Pacific area with a peer threat. Often it was characterized by Admiral Paparo, our Indo-Pacific commander, as ICAD, right? Saying from General Bronner out of the Philippines. Illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive, right, for ICAD. So what is the Marine Corps doing to prepare for those vast expanses, distributed operations? Well, I think force design was our first major step. It was mandatory for us to change our operating forces and to increase our capabilities to operate on the battlefield with a peer competitor. And part of that is what we did is we acquired the capabilities to go long distances, to be not only just the stand-in force, the close kill chains there, which we are doing, and we are doing that right now, but also having capabilities to reach into those and cross those vast distances. If you look at I MEF with regards to 1st Marine Expeditionary Force right up the highway here, we are continuously campaigning west of the international date line. We have command elements that are forward. We have the Marine Rotation Force Australia, which you mentioned there. We also have other Marine Rotation Forces in Southeast Asia that have 06 commanders, MU commanders, regimental commanders that are forward with Marines with capabilities to respond to either humanitarian assistance requests or, God forbid, if we need to, we flip the switch and we go into crisis and contingency operations. So we are positioning ourselves west of the international date line as part of our overall effort in campaigning west of the international date line. When you marry campaigning up with our increased capabilities that were brought to us because we made the hard decision to undergo force design, I think that we are starting to really position ourselves well, primarily to act as a deterrent, right? Nobody wants war, but we're going to prepare for it. And in that preparation, we offer a level of deterrence. And if we need to click off safe, then we'll do that. So distributed operations with regards to from the aviation perspective, we are practicing both our distributed C2 as well as distributed aviation operations. There's a new concept that's being developed and pushed into our concept development phases through all the processes. This is obviously on class at Headquarters Marine Corps right now that talks about distributed aviation operations. How are we going to do it better? How are we going to sustain it? How are we going to employ it? How are we going to train it? So I'm excited at what that will reveal. Again, always seeking to be better, right? Yeah. So can we do distributed aviation operations right now? Yes, we can. Can we do them better? Well, that's what we're planning to do. So we are as sharp as a razor at the first available opportunity. So I think our concepts and our acquisition and our mindset is all focused at doing exactly what that great question is aimed at, which is distributed operations.
And Homey, we know our intentions, but could an argument be made that those posturings, the positioning that you talked about, is arguably provocative?
I don't think a reasonable argument could be made by that. We go in at the invitation of allies and partners.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that argument would be, hey, don't train, don't interoperate with people, don't get better, all you countries that are surrounding. I think that that's a very unreasonable, false argument and discussion. So I think we have an obligation to increase our interoperability. We do it at the invitation of other countries, of our allies and partners. We've done that for centuries, right? We do it in NATO. We do it in the Pacific. We do it all over the world. Why? Because there's a common set of values that bind these democratic nations together. Again, that is the respect of sovereignty. That's being transparent. That's seeking peaceful resolutions to any type of disputes. That's believing in a free and open Indo-Pacific, in this case for our AOR, but free trade around the world that's unencumbered, but isn't affected by revisionist, revanchist, right, expansionist mindsets that may be out there. Those are the camps that are proposing, hey, this is escalatory.
Yeah.
No, baloney.
My next question is from another Patreon supporter, Niels Hansen, who's, by the way, an Army colonel. This is another fastball. Be ready.
Great.
What is the biggest challenge of leading the I MEF while preparing for a potential near-peer fight in the 21st century multi-domain environment that challenges the historic identity of warfare, now this is the key, during an era of continuous decline in national toughness and desire to serve in austere conditions? And so if you followed that whole question, let's start with Niels's assumption at the end. Are you seeing, and I do want to talk about both your recruitment and your retaining ability in the Marine Corps, are you seeing a decline in national toughness and people that don't maybe want to go to austere environments or maybe even be away from their phone?
No. I think the individual asked a question I don't think is questioning the toughness of United States Marines inside the gate. I think he's commenting on what we see, on our news programs, et cetera, things that are going on outside the wire. Because what I see on a daily basis inside the wire, all Marines, not just I MEF Marines, but especially I MEF Marines, are cut from the same cloth as those that have gone before us, from the same cloth you and I did. They all raised their right hands. They volunteered to join us. They all believe in serving something greater than themselves. They bring hope to those that are in despair. They bring freedom to the oppressed. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty. They're wicked smart. They're strong, maybe smarter and stronger than you and I were when we came in. And I think that they have an element of toughness and grit that will serve our nations well, and then when they get called upon to do our nation's bidding. Is there a recruiting problem? Well, absolutely. The propensity to serve is down out there, but the Marine Corps has met its recruiting goals over the last few years, right? Other services have had other challenges and additional challenges in meeting that, but not the United States Marine Corps. Why? Because I think it's of our messaging, but more importantly, who we really are at our core, right? So we join, all of the Marines join because we like to fight. We want to fight and win. So, one of the sayings at I MEF is, hey, number one, we're America's hammer. Why are we America's hammer, though? We're America's hammer because we come to fight and we come to win. And that's what our nation demands of us, and that's what we're going to deliver. So I think that the toughness part, in recruiting, the Commandant has made decisions to put more recruiters out there. We're meeting our recruiting goals. We're going to meet it again for fiscal year 24. I have no doubt with our great recruiting force that we'll meet it again, our goals again in 25. But the pool outside the wire is shrinking. But I don't see any of that inside my wire. The first part of that question, can you remind me of the first part?
What is the biggest challenge of leading the I MEF while preparing for a potential near-peer fight in the 21st century?
So I think the biggest challenge is probably self-imposed by me. Like I said before, I love. It's my calling. Being just a part of the formation, serving with those Marines and sailors is an incredible honor. It's what wakes me up in the morning. It's what I think about all day long. And it's what causes me to probably lose sleep, like I said before, which is, wondering, did I do as much as I could today, this past day, to remove any obstacles, get them the resources, the training that they deserve, and put them out onto the point as a well-equipped, well-trained, well-led force. So we have the depth of the leadership throughout the Marine Corps, and especially within I MEF. The leadership is incredible. And I'm talking from our designated commanding officers, from our commanding generals of the 3 MSCs, major subordinate commands that we have, 1st Marine Division, Blue Diamond, 1st MLG, 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, down through our regimental, our MU, our MiG, our MAG commanders, down through squadrons, battalions, other formations. I'm also talking about great leadership on down to our corporals and below. Yeah. So leadership is a central tenet of there. I think my biggest challenge every day in leading I MEF is ensuring that I'm establishing the long-range vision to remove those problems and address those problems before they become problems, or dealing with the emergent issues and the maximum effect that it can have for those young men and women that are part of I MEF.
Yeah. I want to tell you a quick story. I was in Las Vegas airport the other day finishing a 4-day airline rotation in my civilian capacity. And I saw a group of young men and women with brown manila folders, and I was waiting for a flight to San Diego to go home. And I just kind of watched, and I said, I know where they're going. So I went up and I said, hey, you all headed to MCRD? Oh, yes, sir. And I said, stand by. But I was proud because it's like, especially with social media, right? They say, whatever you're looking for, you'll find. If you're looking for beauty, you can find beauty. If you're looking for ugliness, you can find ugliness. Sometimes ugliness is, thrust upon you and you see it without wanting to. But you could, I think, reasonably question, are there still enough young women and men that want to do this? And it was just heartening to me to see that, yeah, there are still these young guys and gals that want to challenge. They want, like you said, want to belong to something bigger than themselves. And you get that nowhere else. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was a signature away from being a Marine, Homey. And I tell you, I didn't sign because I just didn't feel like I belonged. I know in the Marine Corps, it's more about the Marines than the job. And at the time, I just wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so, the Navy took me. But I'm glad that there is still enough motivation for these young folks that want to go do it. When I saw them, I said, well, that's good. They're still on their way. But let me flip the script on you. How about keeping Marines? How about retention?
Retention has been excellent in the United States Marine Corps. So about 3-4 years ago, the Commandant changed the retention mission. He put it on the major subordinate commanders to retain a certain amount of Marines. At first, there was a lot of discussion and argument about whether those goals could be attained or not. And I'll tell you, each year since then, we've broken the records for retention. So both in numbers and in the quality of the Marines that we're retaining. Yeah. So retention is good. Does that mean that we can, General Dunford, I think, said one time, you get no credit tomorrow for what you did yesterday, right? So we're not resting on our laurels. We realize that we have to continue to bring retention down to the personal level of, what would it be to allow you to make the decision to stay in the Marine Corps, and can we meet that? Yeah. And I think that personalization just speaks a lot to our cultures as Marines in general, and it also speaks a lot to the quality of the young men and women who are in our ranks, right? They make great assessments. Again, I'll say that they're wicked smart. I don't know, you, Jello, you're wicked smart. You could probably be recruited today. I don't know if I could make the cut today. But they are wicked smart, and they're strong, and they're fast. They're well-read. So they're going to explore their opportunities, and it's up to us as an institution to highlight where they are making a difference. And they make a difference every day. Yeah. There is not a weak player and the 44,500 Marines that comprise one MEF.
I would think they wouldn't have it.
No. I need every single one of them. Yeah. Every single one, from the youngest private that's just checking in today to the oldest guy in the formation. Probably rhymes with Cederholm. I don't know. But I need every one of them to do their job, and they do it marvelously.
So getting back to our core topic, aviation, a lot of times pilots won't stick around. If the economy's doing well, they can get a job like I did in the airlines and be home more often. Is your assessment across the board, or is it we're doing really well over here and not so well over there? I guess my question specifically is, how about in aviation?
Yeah, so there are challenges across all the services with pilot retention, right? Mm-hmm. And that is not unique to this time frame. I mean, when the economy's good and the airlines are hiring, we've lost aviators across all services.
Absolutely.
Back, I don't know how far, back as far as there were aviation, military aviators, as far as there were airlines, for crying out loud. So that's been a challenge. Is it still a challenge today? Absolutely. Again, I think some things that are swinging in the institution's favor right now is, recognition. We can't compete monetarily with the airlines, right? I mean, we have a budget, but we can number one, recognize service. We can, number two, certainly target bonuses, which we've done a good job of, and we can always get better. Again, General Journey's axiom. We can increase flight time, right? There was a period there where we were suffering from some low readiness numbers. We're on a campaign to improve our readiness, of course, to meet our mandate, but that leads to more flight time for aviators, which makes it a lot easier to stay around. Yeah. So we're always looking at that. Is there a problem? Sure, there's a problem. Are we taking efforts to mitigate that? Absolutely. Will we continue to do that? Absolutely. It's in our best interest because it's an incredible group.
Yeah, I'm guessing there are not too many problems you ignore. If there's a problem, we're going to address it.
Yeah. That's my job.
There you go. All right, well, I said a few minutes ago that we have two groups of folks that knew I was going to sit down with you, and I said, what questions would you ask? One was the Patreon supporters. The other is former either friends or guests or hosts on the show who are Marines. And this next gentleman actually blurs both lines. He supports the show, and he's sat over here with me. His name is Rick Hartnack. Goes by Knack. He was a Vietnam-era Marine,
wow.
F4 Rio.
Awesome.
And he recently visited Peleliu, the island. He said the Marines have improved the old Japanese airfield to accommodate modern aircraft. What role will an island outpost like Peleliu play in the future strategy of the Marine Corps?
So Peleliu will play an important part once again, right? We flash forward almost 80 years. Mm-hmm. And the whole kind of Oceania, Philippines, Japan, down to Australia, Micronesia, FSM states all play an important role as we run kind of a hub, spoke, and node mindset for distributed operations. So, Peleliu Airfield, improving the Peleliu Airfield, which was recently done by I MEF Marines. Very proud of them. Their commitment to doing that just offers us and opens up opportunities for us to do such things as, it's not just wartime focused on wartime. It's also focused on, humanitarian assistance. Mm-hmm. Again, a hub, spoke, and node concept, just giving ourselves more options to distribute logistics, to respond to crisis, respond to humanitarian assistance, and then if we have to, make the transition into other type of contingency operations. So Peleliu will also play an important part of that for us.
Sure. But with the rapid advance of weapons, particularly hypersonics, the range and the speed, are you concerned about the vulnerability of places that are clearly known their location?
Sure, of course. And not only do we seek capabilities for defensive posture, integrated air missile defense, et cetera, to take care of those or to deal with those or mitigate the impacts of those, but I think it's important to realize that, just because a problem set is hard or dangerous doesn't mean that we should not address it. And number two, I think it's important to realize that, now what's starting to creep into the lexicon is, this may not be, if there, if there is conflict, it's going to be protracted. So there are limited depths to all magazines, ours and any type of adversaries magazines. Mm-hmm. So Yeah. Will we have to survive volleys? Absolutely. Will we continuously improve our ability to respond to those volleys, mitigate those volleys, repair from those volleys? Absolutely, because we are going to reach a tipping point where, you can't just blanket the entire Indo-Pacific with hypersonic, or missiles or ballistic missiles. I mean, you're going to run out, or you're going to have to hit the conserve button. And at that point, kind of like Sun Tzu, right? When the enemy opens the door, you must be prepared to rush through. We still need to plan for that. So that's why Peleliu, Second Island Chain, etc., are important for us to continue to develop along with the capabilities to defend them.
Another past guest who responded was someone you might know, Tom Mackey, T-Mac, says he was in Beeville and the MEF 242 with you.
Love him to death.
Oh, good. He says, I would imagine that the air versus ground rivalries are still well alive in the Marine Corps. Being a fixed-wing aviator in charge of a bunch of grunts, his words, it must be fun to share your fighter pilot experience with your Marines. What kind of questions do they ask you?
Yeah, that rivalry is fun, and it's in full swing.
When there's nothing to do.
When there's nothing to do and when we're younger, right? That fuels us sometimes. I'll tell you, I have not seen that at all in my time at I MEF. What I see is an incredibly committed group. Do I love to tell aviation stories? Of course I love to tell aviation stories, right? But they're almost like parables, right? Because I've learned something from those. So those I share more as lessons learned from a story than I do about, competing against any other MOS or doing that. So I take great comfort. I leverage my aviation background at every opportunity. But there's also, I have I learn something new every day in this job. I learn it from the ground combat element. I learn it from the logistics combat element. So the relationship is just outstanding. I think you probably have to ask the staff if they roll their eyes if I tell an aviation story or not, but I don't see that rivalry. What I see is incredible teamwork between those three combat elements.
Yeah. T-Mac has a second question. He says, and this one's also lighthearted, I suspect the public thinks a general's job is easy. You just boss people around all day, as seen in the movies. The media does not do a very good job of describing what any branch of the service for a general officer looks like. What's a typical day, week, or month look like for you as the I MEF CG? And on that note, didn't you just come back from the Philippines?
Great question, T-Mac. Again, love him to death. We were in our first gun squadron together. Flies probably one of the top 5 jets I've ever seen. Next to you, of course. I think it would be disingenuous of me to talk about, my schedule because, again, I go back to, this is a labor of love and it's my calling. So, I don't have hobbies on the outside. My life's work is dedicated towards, serving these Marines. And it's a privilege and an honor. So, I don't keep a time clock. My wife, Becky, is also the same in serving Marine families. It's not a passing fad. It's a true calling. And I think that when you combine that together, it makes it seem like, the schedule is just full of opportunities. And therefore, I'm excited. Again, I outwake my alarm 4 out of 5 days. I really do, because I'm excited to get after it. Travel, is there a lot of travel? Yeah, there sure is. And when you start talking about the vast expanses of the Pacific, which is our AOR primary to focus on, it leads to some long plane rides, leads to different time zone changes, and all that's great. What you run on is the energy that you see when you get there about the interoperability, the advancements that are being made, the relationships that are being formed. All that couples just to fuel you. Yeah. To go back to kind of the things that we learned, right? As we grew up, we reference what we've learned. And I think the kind of the moral of this story is we learned a lot about fuel management growing up, right? Always had an eye for it. It was your lifeblood, right? Run out of it, you're done for fuel. So I think my job is to constantly get as much out of each rep and set as I can and not return back to the field with much gas except the required amount to land. I view that the same as my schedule. I can't run myself out of gas because I can't take a training time out. That would be failure. But by golly, I better expend it all in a training area and land with just the minimum amount to make sure that, I can taxi it back to the line.
Yeah.
So my schedule, T-Max, it's a great question. Do I wish, the 50s or the 40s or the 30s vision of general officers out playing golf all the time, which, by the way, I think I've played golf one time since I took over command, and that was on leave one day. But I enjoy my schedule. I enjoy what I do. I'd like to think that I manage my fuel enough to get all the reps and sets out in the working area, and then return home for a little reset and then go back at it.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun question because it's one of my crusades on the Fighter Pilot podcast is to debunk Hollywood, right? Because a crusty old general, which you look nothing like, you look young and chipper, but
thanks. I'll pay you money for lying to me later on.
They might just be barking orders, chewing a cigar, et cetera.
Right.
So that's part of the joy of this show is to show that you're a normal person who has a passion for your Marines and the job and still doing it 35 years later. But on that note, right, Top Gun Maverick, I assume you saw it. Did you feel like that?
I did.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
Of course. I think it's
entertainment.
One of the top 2 greatest movies ever made. Top Gun 1 being the first. No, hey, I enjoyed the movie, right? We've been there, so we can't quote it. Otherwise, we owe the current instructor group $20, I think, and less inflation has pushed that up.
I was going to say, it's probably more by now.
Yeah, it's probably more by now, so I'll be real careful not to quote it. But, of course, I enjoyed the flying scenes. I thought were absolutely incredible. I enjoyed, the Hollywoodisms of being there. Hey, we have a unique view, having been there in Fallon. I went through Top Gun as a student in Miramar right before they went up. So, yeah, of course, it was great for entertainment value. I think the actors, from my feedback, were incredibly respectful to any liaisons that they had with military members that were assisting or advising on set. I think that from everything I've read, Mr. Cruz was very respectful and has a natural compassion and love of flying as well, and you could see it. You can only act certain things away, and he was obviously a natural in that. Would I like to have seen it display more Marines? Well, of course. I wish the movie was about Marines, but I think it's important for the public to know that on the Top Gun staff, Marines comprise about 20% of the Top Gun staff at various times. So when we were there, I think it was even a little higher. I think it was maybe towards 25% when you throw in the controllers and everything like that. So, and those are relationships that are probably still the strongest and best, and I'm most fond of while I was there. So brings back good memories. It's good entertainment. And of course, yes, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. Mike Benitez, who was an enlisted Marine and went on to be an Air Force combat systems officer in the F-15E. He has a hard one here. He says, as the I MEF CG and aviator, you have many 3rd MA operational flying squadrons under your direction. And then he lists these, and if we're wrong, you can correct if you like. But 8 fighter squadrons, 8 helo squadrons, 6 MV-22 squadrons, yet you only have 1 aerial refueling squadron, which makes it difficult to organically move forces without Navy, ships, or Air Force tankers. And there's not so much a question, but maybe is that a concern to you?
Sure. Mobility is always a concern for me. I have a deep-seated respect and admiration for our C-130 crews. I contributed to that when we were in Task Force Baltic Watchtower, as we were one of the first units to respond to Russian aggression, where we actually deployed out of the Arctic and to the closest point of approach for both Russia and Ukraine. We were manning caps overlooking Ukraine, and we were about a little over 50 miles from Kaliningrad. So we were able to do that. We were able to do it swiftly. We were able to do it expeditionary capability because of our C-130s that were attached to us. They were game changers. Would I love more C-130s? Of course I would love more C-130s. They are a workhorse around the Pacific and around the globe. The fact is that the Marine Corps is standing up its 4th C-130 squadron, so as part of force design, we recognize the fact that we can always use more mobility We could always use the great capabilities that the C-130s bring, so we're standing up a 4th Squadron right now in Hawaii, VMGR 153. So we recognize that. It's a great question from a former Marine, so hoorah. And I come to rely, and I rely on, in this case, VMGR 352 every day, and they're the best in the business.
Outstanding. Colonel Jim Jameson, who sat in that chair, call sign Boone, he was a presidential command pilot, flew President Reagan and Bush 1. And he says the Marines are known for the high value they place on professional military education, PME. Both enlisted and officers will likely fail to be promoted if they don't accomplish their appropriate level PME, i.e., he says, Expeditionary Warfare School for O3s to be promoted to O4s or captains to majors. As the MEF commander with perhaps the highest operational tempo, how do you ask your commanders to balance their Marines' PME needs with the force's need to keep them focused on the here and now in the Fleet Marine Force?
Yeah, great question. A hard task, right? So we attack that at one MEF in the following manner, and he's exactly right. You know, PME is a separator for when it comes time to promotion, both on the enlisted side and the officer side. So we as leaders have a responsibility to make sure that we carve out that time for our officers to go to PME and for our enlisted Marines to go to PME. We are attacking that by, again, a great question embedded in there are all truisms of, our TEEP there's not a lot of white space on that TEEP. Marines are deployed. They're happiest when they're deployed. They're generating readiness when they're deployed. They're offering deterrence for our nation being deployed. And also, they are out there ready to respond to crisis. You got to be on the dance floor to dance. So we have to plan that out. We are undertaking an effort at one MEF right now and a campaign plan, a 3-year campaign plan that has 2 lines of efforts into it. Number 1 is warfighting. And you can imagine all the things that come in that: lethality, survivability, readiness generation, etc. Our second line of effort is called foundry issues. Part of our foundry issues is PME, barracks, quality of life, aimed at Marines and families because, family readiness, Marines' personal readiness is important to us because it adds to our warfighting readiness. So we are very carefully plotting that out, looking for those opportunities to not only increase or make better the POIs, Program of Instructions, for those various schools, but also in getting our Marines, cutting our Marines, valuable Marines, right? Anytime you lose a Marine, like I said before, every single one of the 44,500 plays an important role. So anytime you lose one for a little bit, regardless of the reason, it has impacts. But those impacts, the benefits of that greatly outweigh the short-term impacts. The long-term gains that come out of sending Marines to PME, and they come back even more smart and stronger than they were before, that pays huge dividends for the institution for a long time.
Yeah. I'll probably murder this, but wasn't it President Lincoln who said, give me 3 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 2 sharpening the saw or the axe or something? I need to do the research. But the point being, you spend some time to sharpen the tool, and it does a better job when you use it. So,
no doubt.
Same thing with the Marines.
No doubt.
Yeah. Colonel Jameson had another question. He says, the Corps' Significant Force Redesign 2030, and actually, let me pause on that. Help me out. Was that the sort of overhaul that saw away with the main battle tanks and a few other pretty big changes, right?
Yep.
Okay. His question is, the Corps' Significant Force Redesign 2030 has both proponents and detractors among the retired Marine General officers. How do you address their sometimes too public opinions with your current commanders and senior enlisted advisors who are charged with implementing the redesign? And this is a question that I had to do a little more digging on. And what I think I gathered was Marines generally try to keep things to themselves, but a couple maybe went outside the wire and were a little more vocal than they would normally be. Is that a fair assessment of what Colonel Boone is, or Colonel Jameson rather, is asking here?
I'll give a little prequel before I address kind of the force design aspect of that question.
Okay.
And that prequel is the Marine Corps always has become stronger because of we're able to handle criticism. Constructive criticism makes us better, right? Mm-hmm. So we welcome discussions, we welcome arguments. they make us better. I'm not going to get into, personal opinions or feelings on some of those critics who have done other things, other than to say, I will always stand in awe of their patriotic service to their countries. Some are luminaries. All I'll say about that, though, is that luminaries can make mistakes and luminaries can lose their way sometimes. So that's all I want to say about that. Focusing on force design, right? General Berger instituted this, started in 2019. It's a major shift. It was going to come with a lot of gnashing of teeth. It was going to come with assumed risk, over a certain time period to deliver, in the end result, a much better and much more capable force. I think to the American public, what I would say is that to not conduct force design being our ability to operate and win on both today's battlefield and tomorrow's battlefield to ensure our success, to not have undergone any force design efforts would have been malpractice on the Marine Corps' part. So I am completely impressed now as I'm at the Commanding General of I MEF. I can tell you that force design is no longer just a theory, right? We were talking about theories before. Force design is here. I'm implementing those capabilities as we speak. And I'm getting better and stronger every day with the additional acquisition of capabilities, structure, formation changes, etc. So I couldn't be more impressed with what force design was. Do I think we went down the right road? Absolutely. Do we always review what we're doing, right, and continuously get better? We do. We have a campaign of learning that the Commandant has highlighted from day one, where if we have made corrections in the wrong area or overcorrected, we have proven that we're not afraid to make corrections to that. We've brought back an HMLA fairly recently. Just a few months ago, they stood up another HMLA back at home plate, increase the capacity. I've watched as the Commandant has made decisions on increasing capacity after cuts were proposed as part of force design. Why? Was it an emotional decision? No, and it better not be an emotional decision. It was all based off of learning. It was all based off of data. It was all based off of facts. It was all based off of wargaming, etc. So we have made revisions to force design. Force design wasn't an all-encompassing make all these moves and not revisit it. It was constantly revisited, tested, strained, implemented. We see what could happen when we put it in the hands of Marines, etc. So I'm excited by force design. I employ those capabilities every day, and I think they're mandatory for us to be able to succeed, to fight and win on today's battlefield, as well as ensure our success on tomorrow's battlefield.
Yeah. You used an interesting expression there with it would be malpractice to not do it. If I can, based on what you just said, summarize, it would be further irresponsible to not also be adaptable to, okay, this is what we need to go do, but maybe one assumption proved, we were lacking some information, or we tried it and we found out that this other way is a little bit better. So you're iterating all the time. You're not just planting the flag and saying, by God, this is what we're doing because I said so, right?
Right.
Back to T-Mac's dominating general statement. So you're adapting, you're seeing what's working and what's not, and you're saying, what is the best thing we need, like you said, today and tomorrow, and we think this is what it is. And if tomorrow we find out it's not, well, then we'll pivot.
Yeah. The Marine Corps I've known, the Marine Corps I've grown up in, is we are not afraid of change, and we are not afraid to advocate for change. Some of my best lessons in leadership, frankly, were the ability for, Lieutenant Mike Cederholm, Captain Mike Cederholm, Major Mike Cederholm, every rank, to walk into my superior's office, close the door, and jump up on the desk and say, hey, this needs to change, and it needs to change now. We pride ourselves on that. We've taken no different approach in force design. Just like you said, Jello, and you said it very eloquently, we are constantly evaluating. We're constantly experimenting. And I think it's important for the American public to realize that, we have access to information that others don't, right? Classified information, just to cut right to the chase. So wouldn't we be irresponsible? Wouldn't we be committing malpractice if we didn't react to what are known information points as we know that our adversaries, potential adversaries, are, doing illegal, coercive, aggressive and deceptive things. Wouldn't we be irresponsible not to react to that? Because, last time I checked, I've always been told, Marines are looking for a fight. We're not looking for a fair fight either. We're going to do everything we can to make it an unfair fight. Force design is exactly that tool.
Jeff Scott, call sign Magua, he was our guest on the show talking about the AV-8B Harrier. He says, is the Marine Corps moving from an amphibious assault mindset to a special operations mindset?
The short answer to that is no. And, I've known Magua, great American. We are not losing our amphibious roots. You've seen a lot of the discussion with regards to amphibious warships, right? Commandant sets the requirement for amphibious warships. 31 is the number. Also for connectors, LSMs, things like that, 35. That's our number. We are not by any means getting away from our roots, right? Our amphibious roots, because that gives us a degree, that gives the joint force commanders, that gives allies and partners, that gives the MAGTAF, that gives the fleet commanders the ability for mobility as well as firepower, right? Which is unique to the Navy Marine Corps team. We are by no means getting away from that. At the same time, Magua brings up a great point of, are we switching to more of a special ops mindset? I'd say the short answer to that is we're looking to always get better. So are there some things as we split down now into smaller teams and distributed operations around the Pacific in order to survive and effectively employ and become more lethal? Can we learn a lot of lessons from the special ops community? Absolutely. So we're looking at those things, training, equipment, and we have our own, special ops capability. That's MARSOC. Mm-hmm. So we are not getting deeper into the special ops world, but we're getting better by taking some of those warrior traits, capabilities, and we're injecting them into our conventional formations. I think overall, we're marrying them up. Again, that's the great thing about the United States Marine Corps, the MAGTAF. Is we have the capability because we have formations across, Marine Air Ground Task Force, across the aviation elements, across the ground combat elements, across the logistics combat elements, where we can take best practices, we can take best traits, we can take best training, we can take best capabilities and drive it into our formations. Why? Because we have them all. And that's how we deploy. So I think Magua is really onto something there. I would just revise. We're not switching. We're just getting better in each one of those categories.
Right. Getting better, and then you just call it what you want. But, hey, we're getting better.
Yeah.
Constant improvement, sure. All right, Eric Reinhardt, who was the final VMFAT 101 OPSO, goes by Tucker. He sat over here talking about the sundown of that squadron. He says, is it wise to reduce to a single fighter aircraft? I asked you a version of that earlier. You say yes, because of the capability.
Yeah, because of the capability, but also because it gives us flexibility in the near future to transition in additional capabilities. Things we can't talk about here, but America can use its imagination, right? As we go into 6th gen, when we get into 7th gen, as we talk about manned and unmanned, and we figure that rollout, teaming, etc. It gives us more options, especially if we are not just, we don't have multiple platforms which we have to carry for, 35 to 50 years. It allows us to innovate, modernize, and adapt more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Tucker also had a question that the three of us were opining about, talking about VMFAT 101, which was why the Marine Corps never decided to go into the FA-18 ENF Super Hornet. Is that something you're willing to
Sure.
address at all?
Sure. I think when you look at the Marine Corps schedule, right, let's look at it from the Navy's perspective, my opinion of the Navy's perspective.
Okay.
Right? So the Navy acquired the Super Hornet to kind of fill a potential gap between legacy Hornets, which kills me to say that, and 5th gen, right? I think it was a brilliant move for the Navy as we see, the service life of F-18s, legacy F-18s being harder to maintain, the capabilities you can naturally derive when you upgrade a platform like they have in the Super Hornets. I don't think that was a logical fit for the United States Marine Corps, 20 years ago, right? Or 15 years ago for the Super Hornets when they were introduced. I think at that time, the Marine Corps had a very sound plan to transition from its current platforms into the F-35 into 5th gen. Now, as we look at it, if we were to try to acquire F-18 Super Hornets right now, that, to me, at this stage of the game, it's a great airplane, and it has served the Navy well, and it will continue to serve the Navy very well into the near future. But are we really going to go buy an airplane that's, arguably, 4th gen, 4.5 gen, whatever you want to call it, again, great capabilities, and fly it for 30 years as we get into 6th gen and 7th gen? That would be bad business practice, right? So why don't we take that money, invest it in either the F-35 or invest it into our jump into 6th gen at this stage? Mm-hmm. Again, that airplane is a great airplane. But at the time, the Marine Corps didn't need it. The Navy did to make that jump and has it as a bridging strategy for 5th gen and into 6th gen, right? The Marine Corps did not. To do it now would be fiscally foolish to do.
And of course, it's easy to now say, oh, if we had maybe made that decision 20 years ago, well, we didn't know that the F-35 might slip in the schedule like it did. And there's other decisions. We can't Monday morning quarterback that. But yeah, your point is to acquire it now would be a pretty big obstacle as far as acquiring, even though the Navy has it, all the training, the whole logistical tail of it, and everything you would need to do to stand up those squadrons.
Yeah, and if you look at it, Jello, from a timeline perspective, right, let's just throw some general numbers out there, right? Say we were to buy Super Hornets in 2025, just in this magical, mythical.
Move that fast.
Yeah, if you can move that fast, right? You'd fly those airplanes from 2025 to 2060. 2060. Where are we going to go in technology, capabilities-wise, manned-unmanned teaming, UAS, et cetera, over the next 35 years? Mm-hmm. And then are we really proposing then, and we're not, but for the sake of argument, would you really push platforms over the edge with, half their service life left? No, that would be fiscally irresponsible. So I think you're exactly right, especially when you put numbers on it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of numbers, Tucker has another question about the allotment of F-35B and C. Sounds like 420 total, 353B and 67C. He's wondering maybe why hasn't that changed, but if someone came to that number, I'm guessing it's either because that's what you need or maybe it's a compromise based on what could be afforded.
Yeah, I think it was the former. So as my time as DCA, again, I'm way past my half-life. So I'm in my 6th half-life right now. We are going to change some of our distribution between Bs and Cs. We need to maintain the capability with the Bravo to go out on our Muse, right, which is our crown jewel as defined by our Commandant, General Smith. Our crown jewels, we need to be able to support that. We also need Bs to support our concept for distributed aviation operations, banging around. It just unlocks a whole host of places where we can operate that airplane that don't require, 8,000 feet of runway to operate on. The Cs is a great airplane. We've always planned to have 2 C squadrons. I think we're going to have more. And those are all decisions, I don't want to get out in front of our Commandant. But when you take a look at what capabilities are different in the C and the B, C has more gas, can carry different types of weapons, more weapons. So we are seeking that perfect optimal balance between force projection and capability with Cs if our next engagement happens to be, gas limited, but also the capability to operate inside the first island chain and distributed operations and not leave there and be the stand-in force that the Commandant has tasked us to be.
Do you envision those 2 F-35C squadrons being in Navy Air Wings?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're planned to be in Navy Air Wings. We've got one on board the boat right now. We've had one already go out on cruise, right? Or it's actually on its 2nd cruise now, but we just stood up our 2nd F-35C squadron. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see more F-35C squadrons. And the vision is for naval integration, but the vision is also for capacity overseas as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the final guest who I reached out to also was here with Tucker. That's Ryan Frazen, call sign Yoshi. He was the final VMFAT 101 CO. He wants to know, this is a fun one because I've wondered this too. In the Navy, an O5 shows up in a squadron as the executive officer and then fleets up, as we call it, to the commanding officer. He's wondering why the Marine Corps doesn't do the same thing.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to serve on command slate boards. And each time I have, and it was fairly recently as well, it reaffirms my belief in our system is fantastic. No system is perfect, right? Mm-hmm. But our system for the United States Marine Corps of choosing the best athletes, to go into positions of leadership works very well for us. The Navy system works very well for the United States Navy. We don't have the capacity to do that. And if you look at promotion gates, just to give you a small little example why, right now, I think that lieutenant colonels are only lieutenant colonels for about 4 years before they're looked at for 06. So how do you get them joint qualified if you send them to, 18 months on the Marine Corps model, 18 months to be the XO, 18 months to be the CO, and get them joint qualified, send them to school for PME, right? You start running out of time. So for our model, our system works very well. And I'd close that out too, Jello, by saying, I gained a unique perspective in 2010. I've always thought it's easy to kiss our ugly mugs, put us on an airplane, send us off to a war zone, and we go do whatever we need to do. But you kiss your son or daughter on the cheek. I did in 2010. Send them off to war zone. I did. It still brings a tear to my eye to this day. Your perspective changes pretty darn quickly. Now, did an amazing job. Air Medal, Combat V, first to fire the gun in anger, shot at resupplying 6 Marines. But, I take a parental perspective. That parental perspective reaffirms my belief that we owe every Marine the best leadership that we can possibly get at all levels. I'm owed the best leadership. That young PFC's owed the best leadership that we can provide for them. So when we choose, our system is designed to do exactly that. The way we choose our leaders, very important. The way we choose our commanding officers, very important for us because those young men and women deserve the best leaders that we can. And we have a pretty darn good system, and we have great commanders that are out there.
Yoshi has a question about a Marine aircraft we've not yet brought up today. We've talked about a lot of others, but not the F-5N Tiger. He says the U.S. Navy is getting out of F-5 aggressor squadrons. The Marine Corps is adding another one. Is that training resource going to give the all F-35 fleet enough quality live reps?
Great question. The short answer is it's going to mitigate it, but is it going to give them enough? No. We've always been thousands of red air sorties short, right, across the Marine Corps and the Navy. So there is no magic move, right? We can mitigate it, though, by, on our side, through such means as LVC, right? A lot of great efforts going on in LVC through simulator training, etc. You and I both know, though, that there's no substitute for strapping in and going airborne, right, and dealing with all those things that come with actually flying and employing an airplane. So we view it as we are standing up another F-5 squadron, just as Yoshi said. We're going to put it in right next door to our F-35 training squadron in Beaufort. Therefore, you'll have, 401 here, 402, I think is what our designation is out in Beaufort. And they can support the F-35 training squadrons with actual, no kidding, tracks, iron tracks that you can merge with out there on the range. So is it the panacea solution? Absolutely not. Is it a mitigating factor? Yes, and it's one of many that we're taking to ensure that our aviators receive the best training in the world as we push them out to the point.
And I think that's my biggest takeaway from this discussion we've been having is maybe you don't always have what you wish you had, but you take what you've got with a good attitude and a hard work ethic and you go make the most of it.
Amen.
Because you've got to be ready.
Yeah.
People are going to be calling on you in whatever capacity it is. It might be one of your E1s or it could be you all the way up through that entire chain.
Yeah, no doubt.
This has been a lot of fun I tell you, homie, I still, so if I could tell a quick sea story about you, my very first memory of you was I was a Top Gun student and you were the instructor. I think it was day 2. Was it threat air-to-air missiles?
It was.
Was that your subject?
Yep, yeah.
And so for those who maybe aren't aware, they have what's called the murder board process at Top Gun. And it's aptly named because it makes you, I think, arguably the best instructor or presenter anywhere. And the idea is that it minimizes the distractions so that the student learns. Well, this day, you, I think, had murder boarded the day before, but I'm sure you were just as sharp every other time. But, homie, you were so perfect. And I sat there and I watched like this. I'm like, what have I done? I can't do this. I'm like, I'm in the wrong place. And so it backfired on an idiot like me because you were so free of distractions. I was distracted thinking, they're going to watch me. I can't make this. So to see a guy with that capability and skill, and arguably all the other instructors got there, but it doesn't surprise me as I've watched your career in the 24 years since to watch you to continue to go up and up and up, because a guy who can do that, I think, and has the kind of care and love for your 44,000 Marines can go on to do great things, and it sounds to me like you are.
Jello, that means a lot. It really does, coming from you. As we both know, you did exactly that as well, and there were youngsters that were sitting in the crowd that looked at you and said, there's no way I can do what Jello Aiello's doing, right? There are many, many, many benefits of being at Top Gun and on the staff, right? Yeah. But one of those, I think, is from the personal front, gives you the skills, gives you the knowledge, gives you the insight, gives you the drive to go out and be a better officer, be a better human being, be a better businessman, be a better father, whatever it is, right? Because you see the right way of how something should be done. I stood in awe when I went through. I had the same exact feeling when I went through as a student. I went through as a student in 95, and I looked down, and when the instructors were giving lectures, and I'm like, how do they do it? There is no way. Well, we know that there's a way, right? Yeah. That's part of the aura, but more importantly, that's part of the teaching process. Yeah. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah. And to your point, when I finished my murder board, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I did it. And it wasn't like, look how great Jello is. I think it was a testament to, man, if you put yourself to something, and of course this is beyond Top Gun, and really work hard, you can get there. And the human being has an amazing capacity. I mean, we stood there, your lecture was probably 2.5. Yep. I think mine was 2.25. And you can give the entire lecture from memory as if you're talking about yourself because you just know it that well. And that's the result of dedicating yourself to your craft, whether it's as a Top Gun instructor, a Marine general, or a rifleman.
Yeah, no doubt, Jello, no doubt. It's life-changing to be on that staff. The people that you get to associate with are some of the best people in the world. It was an honor of a lifetime, and I think that's one of the major keys to any success that I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed because I learned it at Top Gun.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about leadership, but I think if I remember correctly, you said earlier your tenets are, right, surround yourself with good people.
That's right.
And that's it?
Yeah.
So, okay.
No, it's, and thanks for on the leadership side too. Since I was born, I've had good leadership modeled to me. Started, with my mom and dad. My father, the greatest man I've ever known. My mother, greatest woman I've ever known. Most humble people, taught me more about leadership growing up, service growing up than I could possibly imagine or even give them credit for. What's that book? Everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten, right? So there is an element of truth to that. But I've also had the great fortune of working for incredible leaders. And, if it's okay, I would just, there's many, but just some of them that have modeled for me exactly what leaders should be, come along the lines of the following people. Lieutenant General Gus Roebling, my first gun squadron CO. Major Sleepy Merrick, he was my first OIC. Colonel Stress Myers, Colonel Bill Tyra, Colonel Mike Lowe, Admiral Sizemore when we were up in Top Gun, Dan Dixon, Captain Dixon when we were up in Top Gun, Lieutenant General Troutman, Lieutenant General Schmidl, General Laurie Robinson, Mr. Sean Stackley, General Dunford, Lieutenant General Bill Journey, General Berger, General Mahoney, our current ACMAC, General Smith, our current Commandant, General Paxton, it was my MEF and former ACMAC, all displayed for me the trust. They displayed for me great leadership skills. They gave me enough rope to go run and chase anything I wanted to do. They had the wisdom and courage to, when I outran my fire support and got that rope tangled around my neck, they were kind enough to come untangle it and unwind it from around my neck. And I owe them a debt of gratitude. Matter of fact, this is I'm probably their fault. I'm the resultant factor of all their efforts. It's their fault. But they displayed for me and a whole host of others. And then lastly, you know, I derive an amazing example every day from my wife and from my family. You know, the most cherished title that I have is husband and father, who have always displayed for me amazing humility, have always displayed strength to me. You know, when I needed a kick in the pants, they gave that. When I needed to be drug along, they did that too. Mm-hmm. So all this whole ecosystem of leadership that I've learned from has provided me examples that, frankly, I seek to emulate. I seek to emulate it every day. That's the highest form of flattery. I'm honored to have been served under each one of those names that I talked about, mm-hmm. as well as facing life with my incredible family. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Jello. It means the world to me.
Well, and I can tell you, you are on lists like the one you just read, because everyone I asked who has either been a guest or was a former Marine all said, oh, yes, you know, that's awesome. I either served with him or I know him or I briefed him or whatever the case is. So I know that you also are passing that down. And, of course, you're blessed to have the family situation that you had. Yeah. Not everyone does. I was not a benefactor of a strong father figure like that, unfortunately. But you were the son of a Marine and a parent of Marines, or you've said surface Marines, okay? Yeah, as well. So, terrific. Yeah,
the greatest man I've ever known. My dad, Colonel Roger Cederholm, HH-34 pilot, shot down twice Vietnam, DFC recipient. Wow. You know, I also get counsel from my father-in-law, Colonel James Fleming, too. It's amazing to see the ecosystem that's out there that supports us on a day-to-day basis, right? We derive strength from it. We want to represent it. We fight for it. So it's incredible.
But 35 years of service, 3 stars. I mean, dare I say, the air is starting to get a little thin. What's the future for you? I know you're enjoying this climb up the. But what more is there? There's not been, as I understand, an aviator commandant in the Marine Corps since, was it General Amos?
Yeah.
And that's been a couple removed now. So I know you would never say, oh, yes, I'll be the next commandant. But I don't know. What are your aspirations or what are some options?
You know, Jello, in all honesty, I'm just trying to pass my next check ride, right? Which comes from the Marines and sailors of I MEF. Mm-hmm. So I have no expectations. I think the Marine Corps has a right. You know, traditionally our commandants have been grunts. Our ACMACs have been aviators. You know, if I could, I would spend the rest of my professional life working right here in I MEF. I believe in that mission. It's where the rubber meets the road. The problems are real. The Marines are incredible. I wouldn't want to spend my life any other place than that. So I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more honored. I couldn't be more privileged to be right where I'm at. If I could, I'd stay here forever. You know, whatever happens in the future, you know, I would like to stay here and make as much of a difference as I can day in and day out.
Terrific.
Again, I'm just trying to pass my next check ride, Jello.
Not get too far over the tips of your
skis. That's right.
Yeah. Well, we have a tradition here on the Fighter Pilot Podcast to ask about call signs because the public loves call sign stories. Now, Mike Cederholm, Homey, I don't know, I could probably figure that one out on my own, but was there some fun with that in your first squadron?
There was a lot of fun with that in the first squadron. You know, again, at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Robling was my first gun squadron CO, provided an incredible example. But the tradition was with VMFA AW-242, which was an incredibly tactical and capable squadron. I think they were Fighter Squadron of the Year one year, Attack Squadron of the Year the next year. A lot of weapons school instructors came out of that squadron. I mean, it was really, really something. But they had a tradition where they had a stage in the ready room in El Toro, where when a new aviator checked in, they would shut down, you know, at the end of the day, flight operations would shut down. They put that aviator up on the stage, the new guy up on the stage, and they had a list, pre-planned list of call signs you would never get. that went into the mix for potential that you would get.
Okay.
And at that time, In Living Color was a big show here in Southern California. So Homey the Clown, Homey Don't Play That, bopping people over the head with a sock. So a combination of my last name, Cederholm, Homey Don't Play That, that one stuck. I got that on the first day I checked in to a gun squadron and held it ever since, and it means a lot to me.
Sounds like it. Well, this has been a really enjoyable discussion, one I've sought for a long time. Thank you, because you've been such a role model and friend to me. I just think everything you've said today, I hope people like I will sleep better, knowing there are men like you out there with that much dedication and compassion and really just the gumption to do what needs to be done. And as we've talked about, not all of it's easy, and not all of it is going to necessarily end the way we want it to, perhaps, if a slugfest happens. But by golly, we're going to do what we're tasked to do, and we're going to train for that day, if I may, again, put words in your mouth, and we're going to do it to the best of our ability.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jello. The not blowing smoke at you, I'm proud of you. We sat next to each other, right? Whatever that room number that was in Top Gun for over a year. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm proud of the family man that you are, follow you. I'm proud of this show and what you represent. You ask tough questions, you ask fair questions, and what you're displaying out to the American public and giving a voice to various elements across the aviation community is commendable. So that's thankful. I'm thankful for that on a personal level. I'm also thankful on a professional level too. Again, any opportunity that I can have to come talk about the Marines of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force just warms my heart. So thank you for providing me that forum to talk about them. They're your neighbors. They're your sons and daughters. Yep. They are an incredible group. They are committed to their nation. They're smart. They're strong. They're fast. And I'm thankful every day that they're on our side. So thanks, Jello.
You're welcome. Well, before you run off, I know there are rules and etiquette against gifts to generals, but I hope it doesn't count for a relatively cheap patch, dare I say, but a valuable one.
Absolutely.
Which says Fighter Pilot Podcast Guest.
Oh,
so
wow.
I would like you to have that, and you can display that proudly someday on your I Love Me wall, or whatever we call it, where we put all our trinkets and things from our career. But this has been a great discussion, and I hope I asked you everything you wanted to share today. I'll let you have the last word if you'd like.
Yeah, no, you did. Thanks for running the gamut, everything from leadership to current operations to future plans. Again, the opportunity to talk about the Marines and sailors of I MEF and the great families. I always welcome that opportunity. You've been very gracious, very fair. So thank you for that. I will wear this proudly one day when we get together, maybe for some dirty water and burn some steaks and tell some stories, maybe some of which will be true. But thanks a lot, Jello. I'm proud of you. I'm honored to be here. And special thanks to the staff, too, sir. This is a great day and a great opportunity for us, and I look forward to continued merges.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I still do every episode. Now, as a quick reminder, we try to explain all the jargon, but in case you missed something, head on over to fighterpilotpodcast.com, where we have a glossary of all the different terms we use. And while you're there, check out some of the cool merchandise that we offer. For additional content and to help support the show, please go check out our Patreon page. We'll see you next week.